All right, everybody, welcome to Coffee for Closers. Today we're talking all about bridging the knowledge gap, making sure that you know exactly how to, when you're not an expert in a certain space, how to bridge that knowledge gap, fake it till you make it, some may call it, while you are still in that learning process. So all that and more on this episode of Coffee for Closers. If you like the episode, don't forget to leave us a like or a comment. We hope you enjoy the episode. All right, everybody, welcome to Coffee for Closers. Alex Wellings, Rick Kaltmeyer here. We're talking all about bridging the knowledge gap today. An interesting concept, actually one that was mentioned, I don't know, obviously you remember, but our viewers might remember. We talked about the number one sales selling book, in my opinion. I don't know if it was your number one, but it's definitely mine. And the number one selling system, in my opinion, and I think you agreed with it as well, in The Way of the Wolf. They talk, or Jordan Belfort, actually, I don't even know that he talks about this per se in the book. He might mention it, you know.
Kind of offhand.
Yeah. He definitely talks about the importance of knowledge. But he, or I guess he always talks about being an expert, right?
Yeah,
so that's always
like a big thing I was just going to say. Is like his whole thing is like be the absolute expert. Like know what you know and make sure you know
and make sure your client knows and can recognize it quickly, right?
But if you haven't gotten to that point yet.
If you haven't gotten to that point, how do you get there and what do you do in the meantime? And so he talks about that, bridging the knowledge gap a lot on his different podcasts and in his training events and, of course, in his like master class that he teaches to be like a straight line certified sales guy, right? Which is, you know, an awesome course. If anybody ever wants to dabble in a course of learning better sales systems, they offer a straight line course that'll help teach you to master the straight line selling system. You know, I mean, there's no plug here. We don't make any money off of saying that. It's just an awesome course, and I think it would serve pretty much anybody well to better understand that. But let's talk about the knowledge gap. So in Belfort's sales system, one of the first things he says is your opening is one of the most important things.
Yep.
Right? And this is virtual or in person. You have all of 5 seconds, he says, to establish that you are an expert in your field, sharp as a tack, and enthusiastic as hell, right? So you have those 3 things that you have to be quickly. And so you've got to have, you know, hi, you know, I'm Alex Wellings. I'm with Megastar Advisors. We're an IMO, and I'm, you know, we do all kinds of marketing, right? It's flat. I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say. You know, Jordan would say, so, hey there, Alex Wellings, Megastar Advisors. We're experts in the federal employment space. We're doing all kinds of exciting things there. I hope you have a few seconds for me to kind of change your mind on maybe the federal market or doing niche marketing in general. Have you given any thoughts to that?
Yep.
Right? Expert. I've been here before. I know what your most common objection is going to be right out the gate. I identify that and I move forward.
Yep.
Right? He says you really have to hone that in. And one of those 3 things, though, is like you can be enthusiastic and you can be sharp as a tack, but being able to display expert status, I feel comes down to your core of confidence. Are you so confident that no matter what that person on the other end of the phone or in front of you asks you, you have an intellectual answer to combat it, or a darn good reason why you can answer. And I say that a lot too, and I know you do too, where it's like you better have a reason or a darn good reason why you don't.
Yep.
You know, when somebody asks you a question.
Absolutely.
And it's tough because almost every industry has a learning curve. And in our industry, the financial world, it's ever evolving. It's changing. Your opinions on where the market's going to go. You know, your opinions. I mean, like, who knows exactly where the market's going to go? It's a guessing game, right?
And beyond that, IRS laws change every year, right?
Right.
Retirement plan structures change to some degree, right? Increasing contribution limits, different rules to it, the Secure Act, things like that. It's ever changing.
Ever changing. And so it does lend itself to the other side, the latter side of it, of you better have a darn good reason why you can't give an exact answer. A lot of times it's an it depends answer. And so why is it an independent it depends answer? Too many folks in our business give the it depends answer without the why behind it.
On what it depends on or why
what it depends on or giving some situational examples of why it depends.
Yes. Yep.
Right? And I don't see that happen enough to the point where it advisors put themselves in a successful position. And so Jordan Belfort speaks a lot to how to bridge the knowledge gap of being able to have a darn good reason why you can't answer that question and faking it until you make it. We've all heard about that, right? It's like, you need to be on the trajectory.
Yeah.
One of my favorite, so he says you have to be on a trajectory of learning a certain topic. You can't just be faking it until you make it and just hope to just learn by experience. Yeah. That is not enough. Yeah. You need to also be doing some self-study.
And I think it goes vice versa too, right? Like, you can't just sit and study everything from a book. You do have to get on the phone and talk to people and figure it out, right?
100%. That's such a good point.
But if you're just making calls or just talking to people and never doing any follow-up research behind it,
yes,
you're never going to know that answer that stumped you the first time, right?
Right. Or you'll never win in the objection that stumped you, right? Like, you'll always have to learn from your mistake, and you'll be giving up prospects left and right. Yeah. And like we said, like, a lot of industries are ever changing, ever evolving. And so you're always coming up with new objections. You're not studying enough. You're not coming into this expert status. You can't use critical thinking skills to make deductive reasons as to why, or to deduce from, context clues what a result might look like. Yeah. Right? Yep. So, for instance, it's like, well, I know annuities work this way, so if they're doing a par rate like that, then I imagine they're taking it from somewhere like this, and so I imagine there's some sort of downside there. And so if somebody has an annuity and I know that they've been in it for X amount of years and they said they got some upfront bonus, then potentially they don't have all the earning potential that a true accumulation annuity might, and so I can speak to the downsides of that, right? Yeah. So I can, as an expert in my field, doesn't need to mean that I am an expert in every single product, but I'm an expert into how annuities work in general. And so I know there's only 100 pennies in these things. And so if you're telling me you got all this stuff up front, then I know it's lacking on the back end. Yep. Right? And so I can make some deductive reasons by just asking you a couple of questions, and I can start to poke holes. I say, well, generally, that's all well and good, and bonuses could have been the best thing for you at the time, but the thing is, now we're in a situation where we could have a much higher earning potential, and you've given up everything for the front of the earnings potential at the beginning of this annuities policy contract, and you got a big upfront bonus, but where these things tend to lack is in its ability to grow. And we have an opportunity right now to seriously grow with the amount of cap rates that are right now, with par rates, and you might not remember what all of these things are. But this is why you bought a fixed index annuity, so that you could index a bit, right? Now, are we always trying to get 8% or 9% in an annuity like this? No. But we want to try and get as much upside as we possibly can while still getting the downside protection. Upfront bonuses are nice. Yeah. But again, all the upside is going to the insurance company in this scenario. And so it might be better for us to try and find a product that allows us to recapture some of those things from the insurance company and set us up, if we're not using this money for now purposes, set it up now that we've already got the bonus. We're 8 years into this contract. The surrender charge will be very minimal. We potentially could have something with even a smaller bonus up front to get back some of that surrender and with better accumulation rates. And so we could take a look at all those things. Deductive reasons. I'm faking it kind of until I make it, right? At this point, I've got a ton of experience in annuities, so I can kind of use that deductive reason. But what would a guy do if they were new to the business? Yeah. New to the business guy might say, again, Jordan would say, you have to be on a trajectory. So if you know Annuities 101, you can say, look, we need to take a look at the policy. Yeah. How many years have you been in the policy? Well, X amount. X or Y. I bought it a few years back. Okay. And do you remember any of the features of the policy? No. Okay. Well, it could be anything. It could have been more of an income play, could have been more of an accumulation play. If it was more of an income play, then potentially it's a right fit for you because you need income, right? If it's more of an accumulation play, then potentially we're giving up potentially great income streams that would be offered by this annuity because we went this way. Yeah. And so if we look at it, we might find ourselves wanting something more hybrid, something more in the middle. And again, it depends really, but it depends on what the situation was, why we were filling this gap. I don't know why you bought this or that, and I need to know if it's this or that in order to figure out if it was a smart decision. And so, again, just being on that 101 potential, I'm able to navigate a circumstance where let's say I've never heard this objection before, right? Like I've already got my money tied up in annuities. I don't know that I can replace it, but I'm willing to explore it because I know how annuities work generally, right? And so, again, being on the trajectory. The other thing Belfort says is when you're on the trajectory of learning something, you can lean on the research that you're doing right now. For instance, I've been doing a lot of research recently on this topic. Like, so again, somebody asks you an objection. Give me any objection. I don't know.
What, on the annuity side of things?
Yeah, on the annuity side.
We'll talk with like income. I've heard this product, I can't really leave much for my kids if I pass away if I use this.
Okay, so let's say I've never heard that. I say, no, I get that. And honestly, I've been doing a lot of research on that. Because, quite frankly, annuities are relatively a new product for my firm.
Yeah.
Right? But it seems, though, that almost every annuity, and then, again, I'm leaning back on the research I'm doing right now. If I'm on research, I know that I can speak to that piece of research. So let's say I just read a topic about annuities of old. I was doing some research a little bit a while back on some of the annuities of old. And the annuities of old tended to have that, right? This lack of ability to transition to the next of kin. It was generally just an income producer. And if you died anywhere, you would lose all that death benefit. But it seems like these things are changing. And what I'd say is potentially we take a look at some of those options to see if it is, in fact, like you're saying, or potentially better nowadays, right? And so, Belfort says steer away from the definitives if you are in a place where you're in a knowledge deficit. Steer away from definitives and stay in places of let's find out together. Let's both find out together, because it doesn't seem like you're a lack of you don't understand things. It seems like I'm an expert in a lot of places, but I am willing to explore new areas and recognize when I don't know everything. And that is almost a bigger comfort to folks than folks that'll speak out of their behinds when they don't know something. And it almost seems kind of counterintuitive coming from, I think a lot of people have a bad opinion about Belfort, but Belfort was also, brilliant in this example. It's like, look, that is exactly what people want to hear, is that you will not just tread into waters that you're not familiar with without doing research or consulting me and my opinions. You'll make it feel like a team effort before you jump into things.
I'd like to add two things to that. One, and you and I talk about this a lot of times, if you're going to go that route of things, right? If you're going to go with the let me get back to my team, or let me do some research on that kind of thing, at least in my experience, you have to earn a lot of goodwill up to that point, right? If you get to a point where you were saying, like, let me do some research on this, you've better have known the whole first call, second call, a large perspective of that where you were able to answer it really quick off the bat, proper answer. Right. Because if you do 3 or 4 of those, like, well, that's a good question, let me go research that. That's another good question.
You can't really dig yourself in.
Then you dig yourself to a sense of, like, again, like you said, it's like, I know a lot of things very well. This is an area that I know pretty well. I'm not an expert on. I'm getting there. You better show what you know really well on this side of it to be able to earn the stripes to use that kind of rollout.
Well, that is absolutely true. But then you're also teetering into this world of, if you're just new to the process, then you just don't know your process. This should really be geared for specific questions that come up, objections that come up that you don't have an answer for.
Which is 2 very different things, right? And if you're on a position where you're, in that case, right, let's say you maybe did a lot of securities business or Medicare or something like that, now you're really transitioning to the annuity space, that's different compared to, let's say you've been in the annuity space for 20 years and now you're starting to work with like a state pension system or something like that, right? Where it's like, somebody's like, okay, well, what are my survivor benefit options in the Texas retirement system? And you're like, man, I don't really know TRS like that, or I know school employees, but I don't really know fire, something like that. Then you have those kind of opportunities to roll.
Let's maybe play it in that, because that's a good example, right? So let's say you're a federal benefit expert, right? I know that.
Yeah.
and I run into a Texas retirement system person, a state employee.
Yep.
Bridging the knowledge gap of that would suggest that I lean on my expertise in other areas to create an it depends situation,
Yep.
right? So, for example, all right, you're a TRS employee, you've got a question about your pension.
Yep.
You say, okay, well, I'm actually a TRS employee, and, I figured I'm trying to figure out my pension. I just don't understand this so far. I just want to get to know my numbers. I feel like we have a pretty good package. Do you help us with that sort of thing? Say, well, look, I help a lot of folks with a ton of pension systems, primarily in the federal system. A lot of times these state systems are eerily similar,
Yep.
right? And so let me tell you examples of how these pension systems typically work out.
Right. Go to generality.
Go to generality. And I say, look, it's going to depend on this thing.
Yep.
You're going to have options when you retire, right? You're going to have an option that'll likely be just your life only.
Yep.
You'll have options for survivorship. You might even have options for lump sum payout. The federal does not, but a lot of state systems do,
Yep.
right? Faking it until I make it. I don't know that TRS system verbatim,
At all. Yep.
but I do know pension systems in generality, specifically the Fed system. And so I can show my expertise in another area right to this person in such another segment that is somewhat similar.
Which earns you when you eventually get to the what are your specific survivor benefits and what are you supposed to take?
Knowing what I know from this other sector, these are the things that I'm going to check to make sure you're not making similar mistakes with this system.
Which gives me the client at least the mindset that like, look, this guy really knows what he's doing as a job. He's been very articulate. He's explained things very well to me. He's told me like a lot about, again, through what he's been talking to me about his experiences helping people retire and stuff. I know this guy knows what he's doing. Maybe does he know my system specifically very well? Probably not. I haven't been able to find anyone else that does. This guy seems like he knows a lot though. So I'll trust him to go and do some research and come back with research that's real.
100%.
Right.
I mean, and that's maybe even more so what Jordan's talking about than, say, the entry-level annuity guy. Because really, the entry-level annuity guy, he would say, look, you just don't know what you're selling yet.
Yes.
And so you need to learn the process.
Yep.
And so if you know the straight line, like you need to present, you need to be able to perform looping patterns and stuff. The looping patterns are where the faking it until you make it kind of thing works. And then the expertise here, the confidence that comes from being able to execute the straight line sales process ends up coming and aiding you in your openings where you need to be, an absolute expert in your field, sharp as a tack and enthusiastic as hell, right? If you're those three things right up front, you get the chance to make your elevator pitch and do some fact finding and then lead into your presentation and work on your ability to assess somebody's status on the 310s. And we've talked about it in other episodes, and we can talk about that another time potentially.
And I think, too, another thing I'd like to add, too, I like the fact that he uses it as a trajectory or a straight line, whichever phrase you want to use for it. This is something I kind of learned early on in my sales career was like, keep the pitch and keep the path on an area that you're comfortable with and you know well. And a lot of times, a lot of those like weird objections you won't know an answer to won't come up, right? If you can, like you were doing in your, I think, second kind of pitch rolling through it, right? If you can keep questions targeted and dialed into specific things and guide people along that way, it keeps you going straight rather than it being this like open conversation where they just start throwing broad questions out to you. So
well, and it also detracts a lot. So he talks a lot about Pluto and Uranus, right? We're getting too far. There's got to be boundaries on your straight line, right? And if we're too far off of the straight line, it's your responsibility as the salesperson to bring them back.
And even if it's somewhat on the straight line, I'm talking like, again, in our example, we're dealing with like a Texas retirement system. Again, let's say you've got 20 plus years experience working in the annuity space, working in retirement planning, right? If they start like
going into nuanced details,
you want to get in, you want to try to keep the sales path working the way you want it to, where you're asking them questions about their career, like, okay, how long have you worked here? How long have you been in service? When do you plan on retire? Has anybody run kind of like calculation for you, your pension? Like keep it on the pension thought, move it to another area, retirement plans, 401k structure.
I gotcha.
That way you're not letting the conversation get off into their health
the
insurance
particulars
plan
of their
the dental and stuff like that, where you're like, oh, I don't know how that works, right?
Right.
You can cover a lot of your bases by staying out of the weeds on things and at least like being prepped for it. If they throw a question at you, we can say, hey, look, let's work about your pension, let's work about your 403b, and then we can dive into some of these other benefits on our next call, and that gives you the opportunity to go and squirrel and do some research.
Or almost, for instance, like, let's say they start saying, well, yeah, and I just don't know about my health benefits or my dental, and I've got some questions about that. I say, well, look, health benefits, dental, Medicare, all these things, they all are ancillary to the basic foundation, right? And so you tell me you've got a pension system, and you tell me that you've got a 401k system, and those are numbers that we're going to want to know along with your Social Security and everything. But it doesn't change the general formula of what you need to have as a foundation in retirement planning.
Yep.
And so, yeah, we need to figure out this number. That's for sure. We definitely want to figure out your Social Security numbers as well.
Yep.
Right? And we're going to want to talk about because there's all kinds of claiming options there that we'll want to talk about. Maybe I'm an expert in Social Security. I can drop some lines there. And then, of course, some of the options as far as what you can do with your 403b or whatever saving account they've provided for you as an employee. We'll want to check and see what those options are, because here's what the goal is with retirement planning, right? And now I'm back in my space, right? I've taken them back from these questions. Once we've figured out this, we can figure out how to pay for these structured expenses like healthcare or whatever. And so we can take a look easily at the policy's details and find out if you're going to be able to carry this into retirement. Is the cost going to go up? All those things. So it's really not a matter if you've got the foundation figured out, if that makes sense. And they're like, oh, yeah, okay, well, so how do we figure out the foundations? You make that a secondary step that nobody needs to know, right? It's a non-experts thing. Right? Now, if I know about those things, then I'm going to flex some attitude or I'm going to flex some knowledge there, and I'm going to show them what I know about their health benefits. But if I don't know it, I'm going to make it seem like it's a non-factor, right? And I bring it back to the things I know, like you're saying. Brilliant. And, maybe some do that subconsciously, but it's something that a lot of folks need better practice on. Right?
And again, knowing what route you can take to do that, right? Like putting together, like whatever your client you're working with, whatever type of employee, like understanding how your sales process works, how you're moving through the conversation, and knowing, like, even if you don't have a lot of experience in that sector, or even, with the selling of it, right? Like setting up a sales pitch process to, again, guide the path with the client along to the end of it without it just being like this open offshoot of questions, answer kind of stuff.
100%.
And that'll keep you out of the weeds on a lot of it.
100%. Anyway, that's a lot about the knowledge gap, and we can certainly continue to work down. I love these kind of conversations because they're so interesting. And I think a lot of people need them, especially when they're starting to dabble in new things, i.e. federal markets, pension systems, Social Security workshops, tax workshops, whatever it might be. You're doing something new. It's important to kind of understand how, different tactics to kind of get the sales process back in your arena. And so, anyway, thanks for joining us. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, go ahead, leave us a like, a comment. Of course, if you're not subscribed, be sure to subscribe to the channel. It always helps. And we'll see you next time here on Coffee for Closers. Take care.